The last time we were together, Moses had just passed through the Reed Sea, or was in the process of doing so, leading the people of Hebrews to the other side. Of course, the story goes on. It goes on in the book of Exodus, it goes on in the book of Numbers, it goes in the book of Deuteronomy, and I didn't even mention Leviticus, which is really laborious to get through. So, Moses, having brought the people out, brings them to Mount Sinai, goes up on the mountain. 10 commandments come down once. Then they have to come down again because the people have been misbehaving. And over time, they move right to the verge of the promised land. This is what Moses signed up for, right? To liberate the people, to lead them into the promised land, then go into a good retirement, right? That's probably what he had in mind. They come right to the edge of the promised land, and being a prudent fellow, Moses picks out 12 spies from the 12 tribes and sends them into the land to come back with a report. And they do. 10 of them are terrified of the new land. The people there are numerous and they are huge, according to the report. Now, 2 fellows have a dissenting view. They believe that because they were in God's hand, they could conquer the land, these 2 being Joshua and the fellow Caleb. These 2 become key leaders later on. But on the basis of the report of the other 10, the people become very restive and they do not want to go into the new land, and they're terrified, and Moses has a revolt on his hands. And so what does he do? When the people aren't ready, well, he kind of moves in place. That's when the wandering begins. 40 years of wandering. An entire generation of people and of leadership have to die out. And during that time, there is training, and there is teaching, and there is disciplining, and the people are formed into a more coherent group, and they learn about God, and they learn about themselves, and there's griping, and there's moaning, and there's judgment, and people being moved off the scene because they are terrible leaders, and they're quibbling with Moses, and it's a very long and laborious story, which means it's really just about human beings, people who are just like us. You know, my problem with time is not only that it's passing, but with timing itself. Because I find that my timing is not other people's timing, and that my timing certainly is not God's timing. I mean, think about poor old Moses. Moses leads him around, he gets older, he gets aggravated. There's no retirement anymore. It's all been taken away from him. Eventually, God says to him, you can go up on Mount Nebo and take a look at the promised land, but you are not allowed to go into it. Now, Moses had fouled up a few times, but my gosh, where's the grace in this? But God says, no, you're not going to lead them in, so Moses goes up on Mount Nebo. He sees this beautiful land. And by the way, it's in modern-day Jordan now. He sees this beautiful land, and then he dies. And we're told the Lord took care of Moses' body. In Jewish tradition, that's so that nobody would try to create an altar, a worship space around Moses, begin to worship Moses instead of God. That makes sense. But nevertheless, the biggest thing is I imagine that Moses must have been somewhat disappointed. That he discovered, as I do more often than I care to admit, that God's timing has not been his timing, and that his timing has not been the timing of other people, and this leaves him on the verge of the promised land, seeing it, but not going into it. I don't know if you've ever been in that position, but you make plans, you have hopes, you have dreams, you cast vision, and then, for whatever reason, it doesn't work out. And people have a lot of reasons not to jump on whatever it is. New ideas aren't always well accepted. You've learned that, right? And a lot of people go with the herd mentality. What the majority says, they think is probably what the best thing to do is. Sometimes people resist an idea and they come around to it. And other times they will only accept an idea that is their idea. And so it takes time for them to forget the origins of the idea. And then they come back to it and decide it's their idea really. They take the claim on it and the idea is theirs. Some years ago, I was in another community. We had a homeless ministry. But part of that homeless ministry was also to rely on motels for impoverished families. Tom Shadyac came to town to make Evan Almighty, the movie. He and his crew took up all the low-cost housing in the area. The homeless had no place to go. There was the thought given that we should confront Tom Shadyac for taking up these motels and these rooms. But a couple of us instead were sent down to talk to him and his crew. We go down to talk with them. We meet with in a large room actually, with a few people and somebody who says that they're the representative to talk with us. There's a whole lot of dogs. That's how I remember. They ran out of space. Everybody brought their dogs in. You had to be kind of careful where you stepped, actually. And so we were there. We met with them and we left. We pleaded with them, please, do something to compensate our ministry, which was spending large monies at very expensive hotels to put up homeless families because all the less expensive ones were gone. And we thought $5,000, $10,000, that would take care of it for this winter as long, that is, as the movie was being made there. Well, we hear nothing, we hear nothing, we hear nothing, we hear nothing. Finally, one day I get a phone call from a nameless person. She simply says, I'm calling for Tom Shadyac. He says that he'll respond to your plea generously, but it'll be such a long time from now that you will never know. That is to say, you will never be able to connect your request with him. It will be as if it was his own idea. Click. That was it. And sure enough, months later, the ministry on the ropes, Tom Shadyac's group came forward and announced that they were infusing large amounts of money as a thank you gift into that community, and they were buying a church and renovating a church to be a homeless shelter for all sorts of people in the community, and it was all his idea. And at that point, frankly, everybody else kind of forgot it was anybody's idea. And you know what? That was a pretty short time frame. I got to tell you, there's a lot of good ideas that people have that you have. And they're good ideas, but they don't come to fruition right away. And you have to be patient. And sometimes you don't live long enough to see them bear fruit and to be productive. But that's not the way it works, right? I mean, that is to say, it on our time is not the way it works. On God's time, there's plenty of time. And what is that saying? That it takes maturity to plant trees under whose shade we will never rest. So for all you idea people out there, the ones who run counter to the stream, the ones who brainstorm and come up with unusual visions, the ones who, bring up stuff that other people don't, and you get yourself in trouble and everybody thinks you're kind of goofy, have hope. Because I tell you that seeds planted do bear fruit and they do grow. And whether or not you are ever acknowledged, well, you probably won't be, but whether or not even the idea bears fruit, you plant enough seed, something will come to fruition and it will be absolutely wonderful. It's not about time. It is about God's timing. And it is about your faithfulness and your trust that no good deed ever gets lost with God. And certainly that is what Moses discovered. Amen? Amen. The peace of the Lord be with you, by the way. Ouch, that kind of hurt.